Tony D with a screenwriting tips or writing tips. It's really for writers or screenwriters. And little Jones somewhere in the background. So let's get this started. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Thanks for checking out the Pineys, books 1 through 14. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. All right. So writing from personal experience. How do you process that? How much of it do you put in? Well, it's a bit of a sort of trial and error with this. There are two sort of spectrums, two extremes of the doing a personal story, stuff with yourself in it. So the most extreme would be, and a lot of comic guys do this. They do a comic strip about themselves being a cartoonist, right? It's just, Harvey Picar's strip was a lot like that, but then it kind of went beyond that by focusing on certain dramas, and it was different for its time, I guess. The kind of other extreme would be the sort of unconscious stuff that everybody puts in their work that is really personal experience, but it's so processed, it's so you don't even notice it. So I think what you have to do, if you want to put your personal perspective in your work, and what I mean by that is you want to kind of think like, not necessarily making it so direct, but let's say you're whatever you're into, right? Like a hobby, just one hobby. I don't know. Let's say it's parasailing. You're really into that, and but you got a story and you got a character, and he needs a hobby. Well, you put your parasailing hobby in there, and so that one aspect of you is in there, and you want to put sort of your perspective on that. Maybe have opinions about the equipment, where to do it, where to parasail, the kind of people who do that stuff. It's those little details, that perspective of yours, and only yours, because I know nothing about parasailing, other than it looks wet and dangerous. That those sort of tidbits entice people, even if you don't know anything about it, right? Now, for the people who are also parasailers, they're like immediately, oh, well, I could tell by the detail, and they may not even say this, but they'll just sort of get it. They can tell by the detail that you're actually a parasailer enthusiast, right? So for me, it's about South Jersey. So I mention things in South Jersey that only somebody from South Jersey gets a lot of times. That's sort of the flavor text, as they said in the RPG game, writing that kind of stuff, the flavor text. So when I mention something like Coors Brothers ice cream, it's a bit of deep lore in South Jersey, because it's a local chain of soft serve ice cream that's on the boardwalk, pretty popular. So that is it's a detail that people who are from South Jersey immediately get, but even people who aren't from South Jersey who are reading it see that bit of detail and go, oh, okay, this feels like detail, So even if you don't know parasailing and you're giving these details, the parasailing people know, but the people who don't know feel that you know what you're talking about it, because there's so much deep lore in it. So that's definitely something you want to incorporate in your work. But you don't have to be confined to how you parasail, right? You can be, for instance, let's say you're into the parasailing scene, but you're not that into it. Like, you don't go to Fiji and you don't go all over the world, but some people do, and you've read about that, and because you parasail, you kind of have a limited understanding of that. That may be useful in your story. Let's say you're doing like a spy thing, like a James Bond thing. That may be the cover for the spy to go to all these exotic locations where people parasail, let's say. I know I keep saying parasail, but you really use anything from your life. Now, the local stuff, like I do, that's a little different. Kind of what I do is I like to incorporate stuff from my life that you wouldn't be able to figure out unless you knew me pretty personally. Like some of my relatives might read my work and go, "Oh, I think I know what he's talking about. That's the time he did this or that, or this is our cousin, or this is our relative." Kind of, not really, because I process it a little more than that. But you know, but again, it's about that detail, that intimate, rich detail that people will go, "Oh yeah, this feels real." It feels real because there's so many little tiny pieces to it. It's like a Swiss watch. There's so many tiny different pieces clicking together. It feels like it works, even if it doesn't, which is an interesting thought. I've seen some pieces like that. Whether it's a comic or novel or TV show or whatever. Sometimes just adding a bunch of detail that fits, and it has to fit together in some organic way. It gives that feeling of genuineness. And then once you do that a lot, you get a feel for how much detail you need where. Okay? So, for instance, I'm working on a bunch of Piney short stories, and I realized for the one that I'm writing now, it's a bit of a convoluted sort of wind up to the monster or whatever that the characters are going to interact with, and I kind of got to get to that story. I kind of got to get to the meat of it because it's a short story, number one, and number two, because it's a little bit of a wind up, I got to get to it a little sooner. So I can't luxuriate like I do with the novellas when it's just one story, and luxuriate in, say, the banter between Lewis, Hemingway, Shelley, and Milton. I just got to give them each a couple of lines and then move on, because I got to get the story going. But when you're doing a longer piece, you might want to luxuriate in that kind of stuff. And it's also true that I'm writing book 16. Some of the banter between Milton, Hemingway, Shelley, and Lewis, you've seen a lot, so it's not something I need to showcase all the time, right? And this is more for those of you who are doing more serialized fiction or sort of TV writing. You don't have to luxuriate in every aspect of the character all the time, because then it'll get old. You kind of only want to go to it when it works. Let me give you an example. So, I don't know, do you remember the old 80s sitcom Cheers, let's say? So the deal with Cheers was Sam Malone was a former baseball player who opened a bar. He had a drinking problem, but he conquered that, and then he opened the bar. But he's considered a womanizer. And so Sam's shtick, is a beautiful woman walks into the bar, and then he's all over her for, the course of the time that she's there. And it was a funny shtick. It was funny because you always knew if a hot girl walked in a bar, Sam would be right there. But there were times when a beautiful woman wasn't in the bar. And during those times, you could have done bits with Sam and his womanizing, but you didn't need to, right? You wouldn't want to showcase that every single minute of every show. So, anyhow, but your personal experience is something that, at least in the outset, can be incorporated. And then once it becomes part of a character, let's say, a part of the character traits. With Hemingway, I think what I incorporated in myself, there are a few things, but one thing that sticks out is food. Like, it just sort of slipped in there, almost unconsciously. So, like, in book 11, Hemingway and the cousins go to the Hamilton Italian Festival, which is coming up, by the way. And Hemingway gets a ton of food and just eats it. which is something that I do. Um, so then it became, more evident throughout the course of the story, I think, and then I guess it was book 14. Eliot says of Hemingway, "Oh, my cousin's like a bottomless pit," because he's eating pizza throughout that book. So, that's the kind of sort of personal detail that I know because I love food, and so it's the details of the food and how he eats it and why he orders it and why he keeps ordering the same pizza that matter. And so you need to keep incorporating that. Now, when you've done it too much, when you're trapped in your own personal experience, that's when you've done it too hard, right? So I knew a comic creator who had done this really cool comic about his personal experience, but it was kind of like he had told the story he wanted to tell, and then he didn't feel like his personal experience was worth the damn after that. And I told him all the time, "Oh, you should do another issue of this." And he said, "Nah, I don't really have anything as good as that," which I understand to a point, but people liked it. I think what he could have done is do more of a persona of himself and expanded on the ideas he had initially done in the first issue, but he didn't want to do that. Some creators have done stuff like that. They've done stuff that's relatively personal to them, or a character who's basically them, and then over the course of several issues or strips, they get kind of further and further away from the initial offering of a character like them, and it becomes something else. And that's a longer process. You shouldn't shy away from that. And if the character becomes someone else, that's okay. That's okay. Um, you know, if as long as it's like an organic process where the character develops. So, I think Dave Sims' Cerebus was a lot like that. I think there was a lot of him in the character, and he used the character maybe to work out some of his own demons, and then projected sort of forward with some of the concepts about his own life. And that's one of the things you do too. You take those sort of personal experience and then you project forward with them. I did The Fix, which was a comic series and a novel, and I used myself as a model for the character, but Fix's deal was different from mine. He had sort of gone down a different path, and so the idea was, Fix was a guy who was kind of a con artist. The idea was the world's worst detective. What he had done was, initially he had been the manager of the world's worst rock band, but he was a really good manager. It's just the band sucked. So he kept getting him gigs and opportunities, but the band had all sorts of problems and they never could quite match. And I never really got to expand on that concept. But then his next project was that he opened a detective agency with his partner, because all great detectives have a partner. And then his partner's killed. But the deal was, his partner was the good detective. Like, he opened a legitimate private eye kind of deal. But his friend did most of the work. He did the PR and ran the office and got him the jobs. And that worked out great until his friend died. And then that sort of starts off the series. And I don't want to get too deep in it, but, so the idea was a character like me who was good at certain things, but wasn't good at other things. And I saw some of that in myself, right? Like, I know how to do certain things, like know how to make comics and write cool stories, but I'm pretty bad at other things. um, and that's been a theme in a lot of my books and a lot of my characters. Again, that's the personal experience that sort of shines through. Another thing is the dynamic. So one of the things I took in the fix that was personal was a personal dynamic between me and somebody I knew, and then I expanded upon that, and then it became something different. But initially, it was sort of that offering that I expanded upon, a personal experience that then I took it off in another direction. But I started with that core personal experience and just built upon it. So when you're using that personal experience, you have the detail, you have something you know, and they say you should write what you know. You don't want to get trapped in it. You want to use enough of it to give you that sort of foundation to start. Then you want to build upon it and then not worry about what actually happened, after a point. So, some of the things I built upon in the dynamic I just mentioned didn't happen. It was that initial dynamic I started with, and then I built upon the relationship between the two characters as if it continued for a long time. Let me think if I could think of a better example. Well, it would be like if you had, I don't know, a friend from days past, school that you don't really keep in touch with anymore, or maybe you're not friends, and you use that dynamic, perhaps, as characters from that time period. Maybe you were only friends for a short time. I've done that in some of my work. There were ideas or dynamics that I had with people that I guess I would have called them friends at the time, but I don't really see them anymore. And then I started with that sort of premise in my head and sort of built upon it. When I changed the names and the places are different, but it's the dynamic with a little bit of details that really works. And when I say dynamic, I mean how the two characters address each other, how they get along, their sort of roles, either in a friendship or a romantic relationship, depending on what you're doing. And again, you want to sort of project down the road and build upon what you start with. And when you build slowly. Don't feel like you need to push everything out the door on the first story or the first try. You want to build slowly on that. Usually, there are exceptions, but when you're writing and you're trying to incorporate this personal experience, you also don't want to overwhelm the reader with too much rich detail that you can't sustain or make any sense after a while. To some extent with the Pineys, I've got so many characters running around, I have to be careful that I don't overwhelm the reader with too many characters. I haven't had that complaint, but I sometimes worry about it. Some of the characters are in it more than others, and the Galloways have a lot of relatives, and that's sort of the point. But with the short stories, it's a little different because I'm trying to focus on some of those side characters, and it's a little tough. It's a little tough because I also have to reintroduce them together again, and then also show them in flashback, and in the case of book 16, which I'm working on now. So the other thing you need to understand with personal experience is you people do value it, and you may not totally see the value in it, right? When I was first starting out, I didn't really see the value in stuff about South Jersey. Just didn't hit me. I lived here most of my life, and I just thought, that's the way everybody grows up. And then as I got older, I realized, no, this is a unique experience that I can sort of bring to the world because I know it. And so I should let it color my work. And then I did, and I felt like I had made some sort of progress when I did that. And I saw it in other people's work too. I could see that, oh, they were doing the same thing. They were letting that sort of local flavor sort of bleed into their work. And then when I allowed that, I realized that I could also mimic that for other people who, for instance, weren't in South Jersey. I could then, because I had used my own detail in characters that live in South Jersey, I then, when I had a character from a different part of the world or a story that took place somewhere else, I knew what details to look for, so I could add the same sort of details and make it feel that way, even if I didn't know that particular area or culture or whatever. And so you got to get a feel for it. And then you want to start with your own personal experience. And once you get a feel for that, you'll get a feel for the amount of detail that makes things sound genuine. And then you'll be able to fake it. Or not really fake it. That's probably the wrong turn of phrase, but you'll be able to do it for stuff you make up, even in alien world, right? That's a little tougher, but my example with Coors Brother ice cream, I turned that around on its head to say an alien world, and I might say, okay, I used Coors Brothers for the Pineys, and the Pineys ate at Coors Brothers and got some ice cream or something in one sequence. I forget which one. I think it was book 5. And then, in another sequence when I'm doing some, I don't know, crazy alien planet, maybe the aliens just stop to eat some alien thing, but it feels a little more detailed because they do stop, and then they have some sort of protocol for doing that. That is alien, but it's that amount of detail that, and then I could gauge, like, well, how much of the Coors Brothers did I mention or say? What did they actually do? And then I can gauge that amount of focus and effort for the made up one, the alien world, and give it, just the right amount so it feels real, even though I'm not there and on an alien planet, let's say. So, there's really no reason not to use your personal experience. Now, you shouldn't be dictating exactly what happened to you in a book. You're going to change it up. You don't want to use your friends' names or, stuff like that, but you change it up enough so it's not the same. It's a little different, but, you can use it as a model for the characters that you're writing. Even if it's just, say, a family dynamic, right? A family dynamic between, I don't know, brother and sister, let's say. If you have a sister, I don't have a sister, but say you do, and you use that dynamic between a brother and sister in your story. They're not you and your sister, but you're using kind of their dynamic. You might start with something small. Maybe you disagreed about something. Maybe you fought as siblings, or you didn't. You got along great. Maybe you talk about just certain things, but not others. So, and you use that, and again, you build upon it. You project forward in a different way according to the circumstances of your particular story. Something extreme might happen to the characters that never happened to you, right? It might be a murder, or a death, or action-packed adventure through time, whatever. And then you would imagine how you and your sister might still maintain your dynamic, your relationship, while at the same time reacting to the astounding things that are happening in your story with your particular perspective. So I hope I made that clear. If I didn't, ask me some questions in the comments and perhaps I'll elaborate further. So that's my writing tip for today. Again, not too many trailers out. Yeah, So get out there and write something good so they make a movie about it, and then I can look at the trailer. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you